The sky was the color of ink, and the wind carried an otherworldly scent, sharp, metallic, like it had been scrubbed clean of all human impurities. Sarah's mind was still in a daze. The last thing she remembered before the world changed was a flash of bright light, blinding and overwhelming, and then nothing. When she awoke, she was no longer in her own bed, no longer in the room she had fallen asleep in that night. The walls around her were strange, curved in ways that defied human geometry, and the ceiling, if you could call it that, was a glowing network of pulsating lines, like veins of some immense organism. There was a high-pitched hum in the air, almost like the buzzing of 1,000 wasps. She felt disoriented, her senses clouded as her body struggled to comprehend her new reality. The last fragments of her sleep-fogged mind resisted understanding. A low voice snapped her from her thoughts. Subject 503, awakening confirmed. Her eyes shot open, and she jerked her head towards the sound of the voice. Before her, standing in a sterile chamber of sorts, was a being tall, with elongated limbs and features so foreign they could have been from a nightmare. Its skin shimmered faintly under the light, and its eyes, wide and glowing, seemed to pierce right through her. There was no mouth, no nose, just smooth skin stretched across a face that was almost human but wasn't. Where am I? Sarah's voice sounded small and distant in the unfamiliar space, her throat dry, her heart racing. You are aboard the research vessel Segros, the being responded, its tone cold, mechanical. You have been selected for experimentation. Your species human has demonstrated potential. Sarah's pulse quickened as her brain tried to piece together what was happening. The word experimentation echoed in her mind, filling her with dread. Her thoughts raced, but she couldn't make sense of anything. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy, like they were bound by an unseen force. Experiments? She repeated, her voice trembling. What kind of experiments? The creature's gaze seemed to sharpen, and it leaned forward slightly. You will understand in time. The process has already begun. Sarah's body trembled. She didn't know what process it was talking about. Her mind was reeling, and her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She was alone, trapped aboard some unknown vessel, surrounded by beings who didn't speak her language but seemed to understand her in ways that terrified her. The being stepped away, raising its long arms. Proceed. A small panel in the wall slid open, and from it emerged several other figures, not unlike the first. They moved in precise synchrony, their eyes fixed on Sarah with an unnerving intensity. One of them, a taller figure with a series of glistening, segmented limbs, approached her slowly, as though savoring the moment. You are an anomaly, it spoke, its voice layered with strange frequencies, making it difficult for Sarah to understand. Human biology has inherent weaknesses. But there is also adaptability. The potential for change. Fear gripped her heart as one of the beings advanced toward her, placing a cool, elongated hand on her forehead. It wasn't painful, but it was invasive, as though it was probing her very essence. Her thoughts scrambled, and she felt as if her mind was being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. A sharp pain shot through her head, and for a moment, the world seemed to spin. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The pain receded, and her mind cleared. It felt like a veil had been lifted. You are the catalyst, the voice said, now unmistakably clear. The key to understanding the potential of your species. And through you, we will unlock the ability to transcend the limitations of organic life. The words made no sense, yet Sarah couldn't deny the feeling something had changed. Something inside her was different. It wasn't just the confusion or the terror that had been flooding her mind, it was as if her body itself had been altered. There was a sharpness to her thoughts, an awareness she had never felt before. Her senses were more acute, more vivid. She could hear the low hum of machinery deep within the ship, the faint vibrations of the walls around her. She could feel the faint pulse of energy coursing through the room. The creature stepped back, its gaze unreadable. You will evolve. Adaptation is a gift, one that cannot be forced. But we will observe. We will guide. Sarah was shaking, her mind spinning with too many questions. She had no idea what was happening to her or why they had chosen her. She wasn't special. She was just a kid, no older than 16. Her only real skill was her fascination with technology, a passion for figuring things out. But this was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. Why me? She whispered, almost as if she could understand the unspoken weight behind her words. The creature didn't respond at first. Instead, it simply observed her, as though deciding whether to answer. Finally, it spoke again. You are exceptional. Your species is on the brink of a great evolution, and you were chosen to witness it. Before she could process the meaning of the words, the figure reached down and touched a small device on the floor beside her. The ground beneath Sarah's feet shifted, and suddenly, the walls around her pulsed with light. She felt an overwhelming sense of unease flood her chest. But then something happened. It wasn't physical, but it was unmistakable. It was as though a doorway had opened inside her mind. Images, thoughts, and concepts that didn't belong to her alien and ancient flooded her consciousness. Strange symbols, intricate patterns, and impossible equations flashed in her vision, each one building upon the other, like a puzzle that was somehow beginning to take shape. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. It wasn't just her mind that was being altered, her very DNA was being rewritten. The alien scientists were not only experimenting with her body, they were unlocking the potential that lay dormant in human genetics, guiding it into a new form. A surge of energy shot through her chest, and she gasped, stumbling back. It wasn't painful, at least, not physically, but it was overwhelming. She felt different. Stronger. Smarter. More connected to the world around her. What did you do to me? Sarah's voice was unsteady. You will understand in time, the creature replied. This is just the beginning. The alien scientists continued their work, manipulating Sarah's body and mind in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. Each day brought new changes. She could hear their conversations, at least, the fragments she could make sense of. Their words were clinical, dispassionate, as if they were observing an experiment. But beneath the cold, analytical tone, Sarah began to sense a deeper purpose. The creatures weren't just testing her for the sake of curiosity, they were using her as a prototype, a vessel for something far greater. Something beyond the scope of human understanding. Over the following weeks, Sarah's body grew stronger, faster, and more attuned to the strange energy that pulsed through the alien ship. Her senses sharpened to a degree that felt unnatural. She could feel electromagnetic fields, detect faint signals in the air, and even influence small machines with nothing more than a thought. It was as though she had tapped into some unknown reservoir of power within herself, power that no human was ever supposed to possess. The alien scientists watched in silent fascination as Sarah's transformation unfolded. Some of them seemed pleased with the progress, others seemed worried, though they never spoke of their concerns aloud. But Sarah wasn't the only subject. Over time, the creatures began experimenting on other humans, isolating more children from Earth, studying their biology, and exposing them to the same process. One by one, these children underwent the same transformations, though each one seemed to manifest different abilities. Some were enhanced in physical strength, others in intelligence, and a few even demonstrated telepathic abilities. But as Sarah watched the other children undergo the same transformation, she began to notice something strange. The changes weren't always as stable as they seemed. Some of the children struggled with the alterations, their minds unraveling under the strain of the new capabilities they couldn't control. Others, like Sarah, seemed to embrace the change, using their newfound abilities with ease. Yet, even as the alien scientists praised their success, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. These experiments, these changes, they weren't meant to simply enhance the children. They were part of something much larger, a grand design that the alien scientists had yet to reveal. Sarah's mind burned with questions, and the more she learned about her transformation, the more she realized the truth: this wasn't about evolution. This wasn't about helping humanity reach its potential. The aliens were using the human children as tools to unlock something far darker. Her fears grew as she connected the pieces together. She wasn't just a subject in an experiment. She was a weapon. And the alien scientists were planning to use her and the others to change the course of galactic history forever. But Sarah wasn't the kind of person who would let others control her destiny. As her abilities grew stronger, so did her resolve. She knew that she had to break free, not just for herself, but for the others like her, those who were being transformed into pawns in an alien game they didn't understand. The change in her was undeniable. She was no longer the girl who had fallen asleep that night, unaware of the fate that awaited her. Now, she was something more. And whatever that more was, Sarah was going to take control of it. Her first step was to gain the trust of the others. She could already sense the fractures among them, the way some were beginning to resist the changes, while others embraced them with terrifying zeal. But in the end, they all had one thing in common: they wanted to survive. And if she could get them to see the truth, she might have a chance at escaping the alien vessel before it was too late. But time was running out. The alien scientists had noticed the changes in Sarah, and they were beginning to regard her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. They knew that she was different now. And if she could lead the others, if she could unite them, the balance of power aboard the ship could shift in an instant. The stage was set. Sarah's journey was only just beginning, and the choices she made now would not only shape her future, but the future of every human child who had been taken by the aliens. Her escape wasn't just a matter of survival. It was a matter of breaking free from the chains of control and reclaiming humanity's destiny. Sarah's mind raced with the realization that her time was running out. She had to act quickly. The alien scientists were growing more aware of her capabilities, and if they suspected she was plotting something, they wouldn't hesitate to stop her before she could make a move. She had to gain control of the situation, not just for herself, but for the other children who were trapped here with her. She spent the next several days in silence, observing. There was an unsettling rhythm to the way the aliens worked, a cold, methodical routine that felt like the ticking of a clock. They studied the children, made their adjustments, and then retreated to the shadows to monitor their progress. The children, many of whom had been taken from Earth just like Sarah, were either too lost in their own transformations or too terrified to speak up. Sarah could sense that some of them were aware of their changes, but they didn't understand what was happening, and they were too frightened to ask. She knew she had to change that. If she could reach them, if she could make them understand what the aliens were doing to them, perhaps they could band together. The aliens might have technology far beyond anything humans could comprehend, but they were not invincible. Together, they could be stronger. Sarah's powers were still new to her, still unpredictable, but the more she experimented, the more she realized the extent of her abilities. She could feel the electric pulse of the ship, like it was part of her. She could hear whispers of the alien communications, encrypted signals and frequencies that weren't meant for human ears. It was as though the ship itself was alive and she had learned how to communicate with it. She began experimenting in secret, manipulating the ship's systems subtly. She learned how to access parts of the ship that were once locked to her, finding hidden panels and conduits that allowed her to travel unseen, to listen in on conversations between the aliens. She discovered that their language wasn't entirely foreign. It had patterns, structure, even logic that her mind could decipher over time. Slowly, she began to understand their purpose. They were studying the human mind, looking for ways to manipulate it, to turn it into something more than it was. It wasn't just physical transformation. They were trying to break the will, reshape the very essence of what it meant to be human. One night, as Sarah wandered through the ship's labyrinthine halls, her mind buzzing with the information she had gathered, she heard a faint sound. At first, she thought it was just her nerves, the hum of the ship's energy coursing through the walls, but then it came again, a quiet, deliberate tapping, almost like a signal. She followed the noise, her senses heightened, and soon found herself in front of a small, isolated chamber. Through a narrow slit in the door, she saw a child, one of the others, sitting against the wall, head in hands. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Naya, a girl who had been taken in the same raid as Sarah. Naya had been one of the quieter ones, often withdrawn, confused, and scared, but Sarah had seen the spark in her before. She wasn't like the others who had simply accepted their fate. Naya was different. She had a fire within her, one that Sarah had hoped to reach. The tapping continued, and Sarah knew it was no coincidence. Naya was trying to communicate. With a glance around to ensure no one was watching, Sarah carefully approached the door. Her fingers brushed against the panel, and she sent a silent pulse through the ship's systems, manipulating the lock just enough to crack the door open. The faintest of lights spilled through the gap, catching Naya's eyes. When she looked up, her expression was one of both surprise and relief. "You're awake," Naya said, her voice barely a whisper, but there was a sense of urgency in her words. "I thought I was the only one who felt it." Sarah nodded, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't realized that Naya had experienced the same thing, the same sense of being changed. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice equally quiet. "The others, they don't know what's happening to us," Naya whispered. "But I can feel it. My mind is sharper. I can hear things, understand things I couldn't before. It's like they're changing us more than just our bodies." Sarah's heart pounded. She had suspected it, but hearing Naya say it aloud made it feel real. The aliens weren't just altering their biology, they were rewiring their minds, pushing them towards some unknown end. But why? What were they trying to accomplish? "I've been learning," Sarah said, her eyes glinting with determination. "I think I know what they're doing. And I think we can stop it." Naya blinked, her fear and confusion momentarily giving way to curiosity. "Stop it? How?" Sarah leaned in closer, her voice barely audible. "I can hear the ship. I can feel it. It's alive, Naya. And I think I know how to use it. I've been getting access to their systems, finding their weak points. We need to get to the main control center. If we can shut it down, we can stop them from doing whatever they're planning." Naya's eyes widened, and for a moment, Sarah wasn't sure if she believed her. But then, Naya's gaze hardened, and the spark of defiance that Sarah had seen before returned. "Then let's do it," she said, her voice firm. "I don't want to be part of whatever they're doing to us. We need to fight back." Sarah nodded, a sense of urgency pushing her forward. "We'll need to move fast. There are more of us. We can rally them, make them see the truth. But we can't wait too long. The aliens are already noticing changes in us. They'll try to contain us if we make a move." Together, they left the small chamber, moving through the hallways of the ship, careful not to draw attention. The ship was vast, its architecture both elegant and cold. Sarah felt the hum of its systems around her, felt the pulse of its energy flowing beneath her skin, like an extension of herself. It was a feeling she had come to rely on over the past few weeks, the sense that the ship's mind was somehow intertwined with hers. As they moved through the corridors, Sarah began to hear more of the whispers. They weren't just her own thoughts anymore, they were the thoughts of others, faint and distorted, but growing clearer with every step. She could hear the voices of the other children echoing in her mind. Some were afraid, some were confused, but there was a thread of resistance that ran through them all. They felt it too. They knew something was wrong. It didn't take long for them to gather the others. Word spread quickly, and before long, a small group of children had formed, each one silently agreeing to Sarah's plan. Some had been altered more than others, their abilities varying, but they all had one thing in common: they were no longer willing to be pawns in the aliens' game. They were ready to fight back. The group moved like shadows through the ship, using the knowledge Sarah had gained about the alien vessel's layout to avoid detection. Every time Sarah accessed the ship's systems, she could feel the aliens' eyes upon her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The more she learned about the ship, the more she realized how much power it had over them all. It wasn't just a vessel, it was a weapon, a tool for something much greater, much darker. And now, it was time to take control. As they neared the central control room, the tension among the group grew. The aliens were bound to notice something soon. Their surveillance systems were extensive, and they had already begun to monitor Sarah and the others more closely. But Sarah didn't falter. She knew what she had to do. With a deep breath, she led the group into the control room. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing consoles and alien machinery. The room hummed with energy, a pulsating beat that seemed to echo through their bones. At the center of it all stood the main console, a towering structure that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life. "This is it," Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the room. "We need to shut it down." Naya stepped forward, her eyes locking onto the control panel. "Let's do it." Together, they moved to the console, their hands trembling as they began to manipulate the systems. Sarah's mind was alight with power, her thoughts intertwining with the ship's energy. The alien machinery hummed in response, as though acknowledging her presence. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire ship had gone still, holding its breath. Then, with a surge of effort, Sarah sent a pulse through the system. The ship's energy flickered, and the hum of the machines faltered. "We're not just shutting it down," Sarah muttered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. "We're taking control." A low rumble shook the room as the control systems seemed to react to her interference. The walls began to shift, the glowing patterns on the ceiling pulsing faster, as though the ship itself was aware of what was happening. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to keep her focus. This was their chance. They had to succeed, or everything would be lost. The future of the children, the fate of humanity itself, rested in her hands. The rumble from the ship's core intensified, vibrating the very walls around them. Sarah could feel the surge of energy building beneath her feet, coursing through the ship's intricate network of systems. It was as if the entire vessel was alive, a massive, sentient entity trying to fight back against her. The walls pulsed with an eerie glow, a reflection of the alien's power, but Sarah wasn't intimidated. She had become something more in this place, and with her newfound abilities, she knew she had control of this moment. Naya's hand was pressed against the console next to hers, and she could see the strain on the girl's face, her eyes narrowed in concentration. The others stood back, forming a protective perimeter, ready to act if anything went wrong. "Focus, Sarah," Naya whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos building around them. "We're so close. Just don't let go." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs. The air was thick with tension, the ship's systems protesting against her manipulation. It was like trying to bend a massive, iron-willed beast to her will, but she could feel that there was a moment, just on the edge of her consciousness, where she could break through. She could feel the consciousness of the ship of the alien entity that governed it gripping her thoughts, but she wouldn't let it control her. She couldn't. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, her fingers dancing over the alien interface, manipulating it with ease. The symbols were foreign, yet familiar now. She had spent weeks feeling their patterns, understanding their flow, and it was as though her brain had become an extension of the ship itself. Suddenly, with a sharp crack, the walls around them shuddered, and a flood of light erupted from the central console. The control room screens blinked to life, showing images of various systems across the ship, every hallway, every chamber. They were no longer hidden. The aliens could no longer keep their eyes on the children undetected. The ship was exposed. But as the screens came to life, so did the ship's defenses. Alarms screamed through the air, the lights dimming, replaced by an eerie red glow that bathed the room in a nightmarish hue. The sound of mechanical whirring echoed through the corridors, as though the very walls of the ship were awakening. A voice alien and cold rippled through the speakers, vibrating the air around them. "Intrusion detected. Subject 503, threat level, critical." Sarah's pulse quickened. She knew they had only seconds before the ship's security systems locked in on them, before reinforcements arrived. The alien intelligence was powerful, too powerful to fight head-on in the way they had planned. They had to finish this now. With a final push, Sarah sent one last pulse of energy through the console, tapping into the ship's central command systems. Her mind intertwined with the ship's neural network as if they were one. The flow of energy was intoxicating. She could feel every heartbeat of the vessel, every hum of its hidden engines. And then, the breakthrough. The ship hesitated. For the first time since she had been aboard, Sarah felt as though the ship was unsure. The alien systems, the entities who had been in control for so long, were stalling. For one brief, crystalline moment, Sarah had seized control not just of the ship, but of its very consciousness. She could feel the panic of the ship's creators as they realized their creations were no longer completely under their command. They had underestimated the adaptability of the human mind, underestimated Sarah. A harsh electronic shriek echoed through the room as the control systems flickered and died. The sound of the alarms cut off abruptly. The lights flickered, the red glow dimming, and in its place came the quiet hum of the ship's systems falling silent, as though they had been reset. "Now!" Sarah shouted, her voice ragged from the strain. "Move! We have to get out before they regain control." The children surged forward, moving quickly through the control room. Sarah's head was spinning, and she could feel the aftershocks of her mental link with the ship reverberating through her body. But there was no time to stop now. She had made her move. They had made their move. The corridors they had once navigated carefully were now open to them. Every wall, every door, was a part of the ship's infrastructure, and with the systems in disarray, they could go anywhere. Sarah led them through the ship, the faint whispers of other children in her mind guiding them. The alien presence, once so omnipresent, was now fractured and confused, unable to focus on them in time. But they couldn't rest yet. Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would come for them soon enough. They had already started to regroup, she could feel it. The ship's creators would do everything they could to stop her. But they didn't know what Sarah knew now. She was more than just a human being. She was a part of the ship, a part of the very entity that had once held them captive. "Sarah," Naya panted, her eyes scanning the halls nervously. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Sarah answered grimly. "We need to find the main hangar bay. The only way off this ship is by getting to the escape pods." It was a long way from the control room, and every minute felt like an eternity. Sarah's mind was still reeling from the intensity of the mental strain, but she couldn't stop now. The children depended on her. As they moved deeper into the bowels of the ship, the walls grew darker, colder, and the air more stale. The ship seemed to be closing in on them, its very pulse a reminder of the immense power it held. But Sarah's mind was sharp, the echoes of the alien consciousness still lingering in her mind, allowing her to sense the paths ahead. "Hold on," she whispered, more to herself than to Naya. "We're almost there." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the hall as a blast of energy shot through the corridor, narrowly missing them. Sarah's heart raced, but she didn't break her stride. The ship was fighting back. The aliens were activating their defense systems again, desperate to stop them. The group sprinted forward, weaving through the hallways as more blasts of energy rang out, creating craters in the walls and floor around them. The ship was no longer passive. It had become a battlefield. But Sarah's mind was focused. She was used to the pulse of the ship now, the rhythm of its systems. She felt the data flow through her, knew where the defenses were weakest. With a wave of her hand, she sent another pulse through the ship, destabilizing one of the weapon systems as it powered up, causing the energy blast to misfire. "Left!" Sarah shouted, motioning for the group to take a sharp turn. They dashed down another hallway, and soon, they found themselves in front of a large bay door, leading to the ship's hangar. But the door was locked, and the system wasn't responding to Sarah's attempts to override it. "We're running out of time," Naya urged, her face pale from the adrenaline. "I'm not done yet," Sarah murmured. She closed her eyes, reaching out to the ship's systems one last time. The hum of the hangar bay was faint, but it was there, like a whisper just beyond her grasp. This wasn't just a door. This wasn't just a lock. This was part of the alien structure, part of their mind. If she could break through to it, she could override the lock. Her body tingled with the raw power that surged through her mind, and then, with a final push, she felt the lock give way. The massive hangar doors began to open with a groan, slowly revealing a series of escape pods, small, sleek ships that were their only chance to escape this nightmare. The children surged forward, their steps quickening as the doors slid open. But as they rushed toward the pods, Sarah could feel the tremor of a threat that was rapidly closing in on them. The aliens were coming. They weren't going to let them escape this time. "Go! Go!" Sarah yelled. "Now!" The children scrambled into the nearest pods, and Sarah was the last one to enter. Her heart raced as she slammed the hatch shut and began the launch sequence. She could hear the soft whir of the engines powering up. But then, just as the countdown was about to reach 0, a blinding flash of light erupted from the hangar, and the ship shuddered. The alien presence, in its last desperate attempt to regain control, had unleashed its full might. The explosion sent a shockwave through the entire ship. The escape pods were thrown into chaos, tumbling through space as they fought to stabilize. But Sarah wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She gripped the controls tightly, eyes focused on the star-filled void outside. This was their chance. This was their escape. And nothing would stop her from getting them out. The ship was crumbling, its power slipping away into the void of space. The humans had broken free. And now, the galaxy would never be the same again.